And my daughter came and she told me, Dad, you need to come. Mom's in bad shape. I don't think she's going to make it through today. And I thought to myself, man.
This is your host, Rick Reyes with When Addicts Say Goodbye Podcast. Thanks for listening to episode 2. Already going into episode 2, the story of Sherry that we call the Blue Rose.
You're now listening to When Addicts Say Goodbye Podcast, sharing stories of those that have lost loved ones to the disease of addiction and real-life personal descriptions from addiction survivors, sharing how it was, what happened, how it is now, and what they do to maintain long-term recovery. Presented in a practical way to encourage the suffering addict to get the help they so desperately need, and families a platform to ensure that the memories of their loved ones never fade. Welcome to When Addicts Say Goodbye. This episode may not be appropriate for all audiences as it may contain explicit language, descriptions of drug use, death, overdoses, and other potential trigger events.
I want you to think back to when you were a kid, when somebody would ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, maybe you'd say, oh, you wanted to be a fireman or a doctor, or police officer. Maybe you wanted to be Voltron, right? Or My Little Pony. Who knows what you wanted to be, right? Nobody said they wanted to be a drug addict when they got old. I remember when I first got involved in working in addiction treatment, it was around 2000, 2001 when I started maybe doing some groups. You can only do a certain amount of psychoeducational, groups and process groups. So we started to do more experiential groups where we were trying to get the patients to start processing a little bit deeper feelings and connections. And so we did a group where we would have all the clients set their chairs towards the back of the room, kind of like a classroom. And then we would have them tap into those things. What did you want to be when you were young? One client's, I wanted to be Spider-Man. He'd act like he's climbing. What'd you want to be? I wanted to be Superman. Zoom, and he'd fly. I put his hands up and fly to the front of the group room. And what about you? I wanted to be a cheerleader. I wanted to be, this or that. None of them said, when I turn 38 or 45, Rick, I want to be sitting in this rehab listening to you right now. Today, we're going to go in to share with you a little bit about the story of Sherry. She was raised in a small community in Northern California called Merced. And who we're actually going to hear from is who later became her husband. And so we want to learn a little bit more about how they met. When we were doing research for this episode, we found out that they had a very interesting way that they first connected. Thank you, Rick, so much for attending the podcast with us and sharing your story. So they said something about you and Sherry first met, something about a bike being stolen.
First of all, she was my one of my sister's friends that she went to high school with. And my sister, Susie, started bringing her over. She used to come over in this little pink little bike that her mother bought her a long time ago that she kept. And I called myself borrowing it. I wasn't really going to steal it. I was borrowing it while she was visiting. But while I went to go see a friend on the bike, somebody ended up stealing the bike. And I got blamed for stealing her bike. I did, and I borrowed it and with the intention of bringing it back. And that was the story behind that one.
Wow, so you stole her bike, and then you guys wound up, later on dating and kind of getting together?
She was way out of my league to start with. That's why I knew that I probably wasn't meant for her. But she was raised in a Baptist environment on the other side of the tracks in the city of Northern California, Commerce said. I was raised on the opposite side with close to the projects and the bad side of Merced. But her upbringing was way totally different than mine. She had a secure family. Her dad was a truck driver, and he owned his own truck. And we were living on welfare and moving 3 times a year because we couldn't afford the rent. It was terrible for us. So it was a totally different upbringing.
You said she was raised on the good side of the tracks, and you were raised on the opposite side with a totally different lifestyle. What was it about Sherry that made you want to get closer to her?
I think it was her innocence. She was totally naive on the reality of the lifestyle that I had lived. But she was very, she seemed concerned about me. She always made me feel that I was worth something, even though I felt I wasn't worth anything. It's hard to find someone that really understands, someone that's been through so much. That I had through so much in my life, my whole life. To me, it was a disaster from the raising up with no father and always in trouble, going to school hungry, being made fun of because we had old clothes. And I don't think she had to go through anything like that, but she made me feel that I was still worth something. Life could change.
Well, I know as you guys, dated for a while and you guys shared some good times and memories, I know that later on you guys eventually, got married and had kids. Do you remember what that wedding was like and that transition from dating to marriage?
Well, we decided that we both had more in common than what we thought, even though we were different. And I decided that I did want to spend my life with her. So we ran off, my sister, my sister and her husband. And we went to Reno and we got married in a little chapel. It was amazing. It was a great day. We came back and we continued to start a little family. But it was just something, I don't really remember the emotions because it's been so back then. I don't really remember what I felt. It was just something small. And it was in a little chapel in Reno, Nevada.
So after you guys got married, were there any drugs involved in her life at that time? And how are things going for you guys after your marriage? I know you guys were young.
Yeah, it was a double wedding. It was my sister that she was friends with that brought her to the house when I took off on her bike. We ended up having 3 boys and 1 girl. My oldest daughter, Veronica, she came first, and then we had 3 boys after. We were doing great over here. As a matter of fact, when we lived in Northern California, she didn't smoke, she didn't drink, she didn't do anything. She was, like I said, the opposite of me. But because I was so young, when we got together, my heart was sincere to commit. But because of my age, I still continued to fall into trouble. I couldn't shake that. So we came to a point where we left Northern California. We came to Southern California. And in Southern California, that's where the drugs came into play, probably about 10 years after our marriage.
Okay, so the drugs didn't come into place for Sherry until you guys were after married 10 years. That's quite a while. And by that time, you said you guys were in Southern California.
3 sons. Well, we have after she had her last baby, she stood really heavy, and I always had a good job. I came up here and started working in the transportation business, and she was a stay-home mom. She did really great. We had a nice home. I was working for the railroad. We were living in Bellflower, and after she had her last child, she stood really heavy. My wife was trying to lose that weight, and somebody in Bellflower introduced her to methamphetamine, told her it could help her lose weight, and she started taking it with the intentions of to lose weight, and it just spiraled out of control. As I start to think back, it was in the mid-'80s when this happened. As I started to notice, I would come home and I would start seeing people that I didn't know. People started coming over that I didn't know, that I started getting really suspicious about. They didn't look like anybody that I was familiar with, and I knew all her friends. We only had a handful of people, but for a while I was just suspicious, and I thought, well, maybe it's just me. She's losing weight and starting to get back to her normal size, and she's probably working out, and it's probably just me. So it was a suspicion at first that I thought something was going on.
So when you found out or started to think that maybe she was using, was there ever a time where you guys actually used together at all? Because I know you had said you were dealt with drugs a little bit when you were younger in your upbringing. Was that ever something that you guys did together? I know a lot of times relationships will often bond with drug use. So I'm not sure if that was ever part of you guys' story or not.
No, as a matter of fact, she was against all of that. I mean, I myself, I had always had a problem with alcohol and smoked and I drank, but that was it. She never used anything. As far as I knew, she would drink wine coolers with me every now and then, but other than that, I never suspected her of doing anything else other than that. But no, we didn't. I never consumed anything with her.
Did she ever get the opportunity to go into any form of drug treatment at all, like any meetings or maybe a rehab program of any sort?
I put her in a clinic one time, and she didn't want to go. I took her. She was kicking and fighting the whole time. The methamphetamine was how coming down off that drug could be so terrible, so horrific on a person, take its toll. And I finally got her to go into a treatment center. Had good insurance. I was still working for the railroad, and it hurt me so bad because I couldn't reach her. As much as I tried, she begged me that she would just get her out of there. You know, I thought you loved me, get me out of here, out to bed, or I promise you. And my heart melted. In about a week or so, she convinced me. No, as a matter of fact, I came home from work, and she had signed herself out. She had signed herself out of the clinic, and she was at home. And she was okay for about a week, and then just got 10 times worse than what it was when I put her in the clinic.
You know, it's always amazed me how treatment centers operate and even how addiction recovery treatment is voluntary. I mean, even if for someone like me that's worked in addiction treatment for over a decade, is just amazing to me, you know. And I think a lot of times we're guilty of people that work in this industry of putting out false information out there or misleading information or just kind of passing down these concepts that we're taught, like, you know, the addict has to really, really want to change in order to be in the program, or if they really want to get clean, they can get clean anywhere, regardless of what kind of program they're in. And when I hear counselors say things like, you know, I really only want to work with people that really want to be here, well, then my thought is, well, why would they need you then? If they were truly 100% committed to wanting to get the help, why would they need any assistance? And I'm sure there's people on the other end of this just like chomping at the bits, right? Getting ready to type in some comments and send us over some emails. But we're dealing with resistance when they go into treatment. And a lot of times when people do go into treatment, on the other side of things, families are really sitting home with their fingers crossed, and they're just praying that this is going to be the last opportunity or the last time they have to worry about it. Like their loved one is going to get clean and sober and never, ever use again, or the client will be in treatment and they'll want to leave. Instead of us as counselors or recovery workers facilitating some sort of intervention, I've seen, you know, many people just let them walk right out the door. Oh, or, you know, they'll say things like, we didn't call you, you called us, or, you know, the door swings both ways, or, you know, just all of this horrible information that I've heard throughout the years. And I know now that our profession is really evolving and we're really trying to improve and change our vocabulary and the way we actually provide care to the people in treatment. Because when I think of this opportunity of the time your wife had the chance to get into a program, I know that, you know, she probably continued to struggle with addiction because she didn't complete the program. She left on her own, right? So what happened when she left the rehab?
When she got out of treatment, it got so bad that we ended up losing everything. We found ourselves living in motels, and we found ourselves getting raided by the police, and just got to a point where there was a separation involved.
Addiction is definitely a family disease, and it's something that affects every person inside the unit. I've heard a lot of people that struggle with the substance use disorders on their own say, I'm not hurting anybody but myself. You know, my family doesn't, you know, it doesn't affect them. Or they'll say, I was a functional addict. And I've always laughed at that because, you know, I actually don't think that there's such a thing as a functional addict. I think there's a functioning addict, but not functional. Usually that just means that they were able to keep a job while they were in their addiction. They were still functioning, but there's definitely still a lot of dysfunction that happens in the addicted family. We're going to take a look and learn a little bit from kids' perspective. And we had the opportunity to hear from one of Sherry's sons. So I want to hear from Johnny. They all often say, Johnny, that kids don't really know what's going on in the home. What do you think from your side of things? Do you think that you knew things were actually happening in regards to drug use when you were growing up?
To be honest, I think like that people say like, oh, the kids don't know, but the kids know. And the parents that are addicts, they hope and they think that the kids don't know, but they know what's going on. There's trying to come in and out of the house, and different people every day, and parents are locked in their rooms and stuff like that. So yeah, I always kind of I knew something was going on behind those bedroom doors.
So you say that you feel like you had an idea that there was something going on behind those bedroom doors. Do you think your siblings also felt the same way, that they felt that they knew something was going on? There was a little bit more to this issue in their home than maybe was being talked about?
I think like everybody played different roles. As far as like my sister Veronica, she's the oldest, and she kind of like tried to shelter us from that. Like, oh, get over here, mom and dad are having adult time or whatever. She tried to shelter us from reality. And older brother Rick, he would try to get me out of the house and stuff like that. And then my little brother, he was kind of young at the time, during that time, but I think it brought us closer, but it's more of us trying to occupy each other's minds about what was really going on in the household.
When we talk about something like the family system and how everybody's affected, I remember a book that I've been teaching from for years in our addiction studies programs called Another Chance by Sharon Cruz. And in that book, she talks about the family roles, the dependent person, the enabler, the hero, the scapegoat, mascot, lost child. And in those, basically everybody adapts and, they put together a role to kind of survive within the system. And that's exactly what happens. The kids almost start to mimic and display some of these dysfunctional behaviors. And in a lot of cases, some of the kids will even, run, especially with the scapegoat and even, some of the other roles, but primarily with the scapegoat, they'll run and hit the streets and say, I'm not going to use, maybe drugs. I don't want to be like, addicted like mom and dad are. And maybe the hero of the family is not getting recognition, even though they're trying to do real well and go to school and be this good example. You know what? I'm just going to hit the streets. So with that, a lot of times kids will even develop problems of their own when it comes to drugs. Johnny, was that something that you experienced with, or did you ever develop any drug problems?
So I remember as a kid, like my brother Rick would take me out with him. It was homework and stuff I got just to get so I can get out of the house. And I think I was about 9 years old this time. I think I was in 4th grade, and I had went out with Rick. Rick was probably about 6 years older than me, about 15 years old. And we had went out, met up with a couple of those homeboys, and we had went to this abandoned house. It was in Downey off of Imperial and Rose. And his homeboy Droopy, he had a couple 40s. 9 years old, killed a 40. I was wasted, and I always remember that because like people will talk about, oh yeah, the first time I ever got drunk was like 6 years old. I was like, well, the first time I ever got drunk was 9 years old. So my older brother was in gangs. He was doing meth and whatever else you can get his hands on. And my mom used to sell meth. And so when she would leave, she would give me this pencil box, like, here, stash this. Don't let no one get to it. I'll get it when I come back. I started like, I don't know, probably about like 11, 12 years old, holding the pencil box. So about when I was 14 years old, she had left pencil box me. During that time, I was already like smoking weed here and there, drinking, inhaling like air freshener and like doing like knobs and stuff like that at 14. By that time, I already knew what was in the pencil box. It was her stash. And I'd say probably about 13 when I figured out I finally looked in the pencil box. And there was like pipes and different stuff in there, paraphernalia and the stash. I don't know if you ever seen Pulp Fiction, but there's these two hitmans that got this briefcase and never show what's in the briefcase. And finally at the end, they open this briefcase and they still don't show what's in it, but it's just like this gold glow comes out there. And they're like, oh. And so finally when I did look in the pencil box, I was like, wow, this is what's in here. Wow, like torches and different stuff. So the next year when I turned 14, not when I turned 14, but I was 14 years old. I was holding the pencil box and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try something, see what the big deal is. Everybody's getting high in the house. We have people coming over, everybody's You know, they're having a great time. So I tried it, and I got a little extra, and I put it in my wallet. And everybody was gone, so I tried it. And that day, my mom had made tacos, and that's everybody's favorite, all the kids' favorites. And I was like, no, you know what? Yeah, I was high. I was high on my mind. My mom was like, oh, you want tacos? I'm like, no, I'm good. She's like, what? You don't want no tacos? I'm like, no, I'm good. I was like, hey, the table's kind of wobbly. Let me help you fix this table. Let me tighten the screws. And I was on one. And she knew it right offhand. She's like, did you get into my stash? I was like, no, I'm good. She's in a good mood. But she knew already, but she never really confronted me about it at the time. So my best friend lived downstairs in another apartment, and his parents were all tweaked out. So I was staying the night, and I dropped my wallet over there. His stepdad found my wallet and seen that I had a little bit of the meth that I had stolen out of my mom's stash. He did the meth and then told on me afterwards. That was my one and only time trying it, but it's just like that could have been a lifelong situation if I wouldn't have got caught.
So you had said that you were, I know when you were in the pencil box, you said you wanted to see kind of what the big deal was. So people would kind of come over, and there was like a lot of movement at the house. Tell me a little bit more about what that environment was like.
Well, my dad was always drinking, smoking weed. I don't really think he was too big into heroin around that time. He probably would dibble and dabble a little bit, but he for sure was drinking like heavily. And then my mom was doing meth. My older brother Rick was doing meth, and the only ones who weren't getting high was me and my little brother. We had all kinds of people in and out of the house. We had transients that would come over and clean our house for a little hit, and we just always had people there at our house. It was just like, it wasn't a flop house, so people weren't really staying there, but it was just like a revolving door. People coming in and out all day.
When you think about your mom, are there any happy or positive moments that come to mind? I know you were talking about her famous tacos that you and all the kids liked. Was there anything else that kind of sticks out in your mind as a happy or funny moment?
There were a few things. I used to always spend a lot of time with my mom by myself with her. But the one story always sticks on my mind, I'm always telling this story. One day she was leaving, and we had like an old station wagon with the wood paneling and stuff. I was like, hey, let me go with you. And she's like, no, you stay here. You don't need to go. So I was like, all right, I'm going with her. So I jumped in the back of the car, and I hid in the back of the station wagon, and I waited till we were far away so you couldn't turn back around. We lived in Downey at the time, so I probably jumped up probably in Paramount. And I was like, surprise, I'm here. And she's like, yeah, I wanted to go. And she's like, put your seatbelt on, you little motherfucker, sit down. So she had to stow away for a little bit. And so we ended up going on a mission and stuff. And I was like, man, let's go, I'm tired. And she's like, well, you should have stayed home. I told you to stay home. But yeah, that's one next story I always will remember.
So, we're trying to get people to understand that this is a family issue, a family disease, a family problem. And of course, every listener isn't going to be able to relate to the fact that everyone in their household was using, and people coming in and out of the house. They maybe have one family member alone that's using, they're trying to get into treatment, or, maybe a kid's listening and he can relate to the fact that there's mom and dad are using drugs and would love to see how they can get help. And I'm sure it impacts the kids on some level. Do you feel that being in that environment and knowing that drugs were there and even trying them yourself, do you think that impacted you at all as a kid?
I don't think it really impacted me as a youngster. I think more as an adult, because everything was such a secret in our house. Like, don't tell people what's going on in our house. Your dad don't live with us, or this and this and this. And everything was secret. So now as an adult, it's like, it's hard for me to open up to people, because I'm like, are they going to judge me on what's going on with this stuff? Like, because of how I was raised, that everything is secret in our household. So I think that affects me in the long run. But as a kid, I was just being a kid. At the time, I thought that, but there's little stuff that sticks in my mind. But it's just like, I feel like I was just being a kid having a blast. We really had too much guidance, so we were able to go have fun and be kids. We weren't sheltered. It's like now it's hard for me to open up, or like what happens in my household stays in my household now as an adult. And it's like, okay, you know what? We need to be over here. If I'm having a disagreement with my wife, like, okay, you know what? We'll settle it in our house. Don't tell your mom nothing. Nobody needs to know our business. It's our business. And I think most of it is because we don't want outsiders to know, look down on us, to be honest, because that's how it was as a kid.
So now we've come a long way from the days of growing up on the good side of the tracks, having her bicycle stolen, or having a double wedding with one of her friends. She got to the point now where drug use has become such a problem. Now it sounds like the whole system is kind of being impacted and surrounded by drugs. And that's one thing that people will notice is in the beginning, there's so many different reasons why people start. There's not just one reason you can say people use drugs because of this. Every individual has their own reason for picking up that first time. But eventually the drugs kind of get a hold of you. And now that choice to be able to put it down is not as easy as just saying no, as Nancy Reagan maybe back in the days would like us to have said. Now they're in Southern California and drug became a reality and drug use became an everyday part of their life. Let's learn a little bit from Rick about how his wife's health started being infected because they started to see some changes happening in Sherry's body. One thing we want to remember is that not everybody that loses the battle to addiction does so over an overdose.
She would come up north, and I noticed that her stomach was really swollen. I asked her if she was okay. She told me she had been going to the doctor. Her liver was acting up, and she would come for a week or two. We had relocated, me and my two boys, in Northern California. She would come and for a couple of weeks and tell me everything was fine. And every time she would do that, she would leave and come back, leave and come back. And every time I saw her health in worse condition. One day she came to LA and she called me one day and she told me I'm dying. Doctors say I'm dying. And I told her, well, I'm going to send one of my sons. He was old enough to take a ride on the train. And I told my son, if your mom's really sick, call me and I'll come up there. And when he made it to Los Angeles, he called me that same night and told me, Dad, you need to get up here. She's really bad. She's really bad. She can't even get out of bed. And it was really bad. It's really bad then. That same week, I ended up packing all our stuff in a U-Haul trailer, and I drove to Bell Gardens, where she had rented a little trailer that was probably big enough for one person. She was staying there, and my daughter. It was love. It was the love that I have for her and the respect to know that she was in that condition and there was nothing that I could do. I got to see her. She had sores all over her legs. It had just ate her up inside and out, and I just felt so bad. I just said, well, I'm here. Let me help you. And I tried to help her as much as I could.
Are you looking to start out on a new career as a substance use disorder counselor? Or are you in need of a career advancement program? Here's your perfect opportunity. Enroll today at ADCS Institute to get started. We offer a fast and affordable option for individuals interested in becoming certified substance use disorder counselors in California. At ADCSI, you have the opportunity to complete your CCAP or CADTP approved education from the comfort of your own home or office through our digital classroom. With our interactive learning management platform, you will review lectures, PowerPoint presentations, take part in written assignments, content-specific projects, textbook reading, and even participate in live webinars. We also provide that additional clarification, encouragement, and support often needed to fully grasp course content. And to fit in with your schedule, our programs are available in 2 certificate tracks for you to choose from, the 15 months and the 6-month fast track programs. Whatever your preferred learning style, we incorporate a blend of teaching methodologies to ensure that you are able to fully comprehend and embrace each lesson in order to receive maximum benefits of our course curriculum. Let's make your dream job a reality. Our team is ready to guide you from registration, completion of didactic hours, supervision of clinical externship, preparing for your state exam, and of course, job search. For more details, visit www.adcsinstitute.com to get started. ADCSI, turning negative past into positive futures.
Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Listen, I've worked in addiction treatment for over 20 years, and there were plenty of times where after individual sessions, doing groups all day, assessments and treatment plans, only to have to leave work and deal with my own self and my own issues. If it wasn't for my therapist, only God knows where I would be today. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 24 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. There's a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's counselor network, which may not be locally available in many areas. This service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or telephone sessions so you'll never have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy ever again. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if you need to. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living your happier life today. Visit their website at betterhelp.com/WASG. That's BetterHelp, HELP/WASG. And join over 500,000 people taking charge of their mental health today with the help of experienced professionals. We have a special offer for When Addicts Say Goodbye podcast listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/WASG. Sherry's health started going on a rapid decline. Her body got to the point where it was negatively responding to the years of methamphetamine use. You know, the stuff they put into that drug. I mean, a simple Google search will show you exactly why they call it, you know, bathtub dope, right? Or these homemade labs and how they make this stuff today. Her body got to the point where her legs started to swell up and her feet so bad that they would be so hard, and her kids would tell stories of being on the floor and patting down her legs and her feet with toilet paper or napkins to get the water that was seeping from her pores and, you know, the toxins basically coming out of her body. She couldn't breathe. And I remember she would take cough drops, and she would get that immediate burst of that cold air. And she would say, "This must have been made by God, because I could breathe so good for a second with this cough drop in my mouth." Not only was Rick Sherry's husband and Johnny Sherry's son, but Rick is my dad. Johnny, yes, it was my younger brother, and I'm the one that took him out for that 40 of King Cobra at the age of 9. And therefore that means that Sherry is my mother. This greatly affected me all throughout my years, and one of the major reasons why I got involved in working in addiction treatment the same year she passed away in 1999. Let me go on and share with you a story. A couple years ago, I wrote this when I was in treatment. I was working in a rehab, and I started to, of course, think a little bit about my mom, because I have a picture of her always in my office. I have one actually in the back of my office now that my wife had given to me for a birthday gift one year. Somebody drew of my mom. And here's a story that I'm going to share with you that I call The Small Things. I never appreciated roses during my addiction. I never appreciated the small things. I thought the world owed me something because of my disability. You see, I was born premature, 2 pounds, 5 ounces, a brand new bouncing baby boy that the doctors fractured his spine. And as a result of that, I would spend the rest of my life confined to a wheelchair. And that might sound a little bit more dramatic than it actually is, because my personal philosophy is this: since I've never known what it's like to walk, I'll never miss it. I was raised in a home with both parents, an older sister and 2 brothers. I never appreciated roses in my addiction. I never appreciated the small things. During elementary school, I remember lying to my father. Seeking his acceptance, I told him that I was chosen to be the captain of the handball team. In reality, I was shunned away from other children my age, and I wish that I would have been able to play, especially because it was one of my dad's favorite weekend pastimes. My mother gave me some extra attention and love, and my siblings might even say she spoiled me. I never appreciated roses during my addiction. I never appreciated the small things. My mother and father had a secret job that we could not talk about. They were drug dealers, not like the stuff that you saw in the movies. This was real life to us. It was normal. And I remember thinking, everybody's mother and father sells dope, don't they? My mother, Sherry, she slowly began to use more of this drug than she began to sell. As the years went by, she began suffering consequences from her drug use. We no longer lived in a nice home. We now lived in motels. Imagine living in a motel. It was also, again, normal to us. Going to the liquor store to get some frozen burritos and a Dr. Pepper for dinner was like going to Benihana's for lobster. And when the rent was paid for the week, there was a feeling of relief that everything was going to be okay for a while. By that time, my dad was no longer around. I never appreciated roses during my addiction. I never appreciated the small things. I joined a gang and began to use drugs myself at the age of 12. Gangbanging from a wheelchair was no easy task. Gaining respect from my peers was a challenge, but because of my charismatic style and leadership ability, I quickly developed trust and confidence with my new peer group. They even gave me a new name. I went from Ricky to Puppet from Brock Avenue Locos 13. From being isolated to having many associates, and from being harmless and insecure to pistol packing full of arrogance. I never appreciated roses during my addiction. I never appreciated the small things. One day I came home from school and I pushed my wheelchair down the street into the parking lot of the Apollo Motel in Downey. Opened up the door and I parked my wheelchair by the side of the bed. I remember transferring myself to the edge of the bed from my wheelchair and feeling sad. No one was there at the time, and it was October 24th, my birthday. I can't remember how old I was that day, but it's a day that I'll never forget. I heard the car drive up and the door slam. I recognized the sound of my mom's old station wagon. I knew that we did not have any money for a gift, so I wasn't really expecting anything. I knew that we were struggling just to pay the motel rent, but all of a sudden my mom walked in the door with her hand behind her back. A feeling of happiness overwhelmed me as she looked into my eyes with the very pure look of a loving mother, and she said, "I know it's not much, but..." Then she pulled her hand from behind her back and handed me one single blue rose. I extended my hand and accepted this gift from my mother. I never appreciated roses during my addiction. I never appreciated the small things. Years later, my mother's health became drastically worse as a result of her addiction. Her body began to swell, and she had difficulty breathing from the years of smoking methamphetamine. The ambulance had to take her to the hospital, and to our shock, they admitted her into ICU. We did not know what to do. All we had was each other, and we were very scared. I remember rolling into the ICU, holding my mom's hand as she laid there on the bed. She asked and gestured if I would pray for her. I gladly accepted this opportunity, and I prayed a prayer of healing. I said something like this: "God, I'm praying right now for my mother's healing. Give her body strength to leave this hospital." With this prayer, I looked into her eyes, and she had tubes attached to her, oxygen mask, and she looked at me and shook her head. No, no, no. I never appreciated roses during my addiction. I never appreciated the small things. I finally ran out of options. I went into the hospital chapel and prayed a prayer, again, this time a little bit more focused, and it went something like this: "Hey God, it's me, Ricky. I need you to either do one of two things. Heal her so that way we can leave and take her home, or take her now so she's not in pain." It seemed like immediately after that prayer, the nurse ran to the chapel and said, "Please hurry to your mom's room." We called the chaplain to come. We all ran to her room and held her hand, rubbed her legs and her feet, and we heard that slow beep that seemed to fade away along with all of my hopes for her healing. She was gone, and I did not know why. I never appreciated roses during my addiction, but I appreciate the small things now. Every wheelchair she ever bought me, every frozen burrito from Soupy's Liquor or homemade tacos she made us with that salsa, seeing her beautiful red hair, green eyes, and funny spirit. Sherry Reyes was more than an addict. She was my mom, and she did her best with what she had. I used to spend a lot of time focusing on what I did not have, but now I understand that I had more than I ever knew. I will always appreciate roses in my recovery. I will always appreciate the small things.
When Addicts Say Goodbye podcast is not meant to be used as a substitute or replacement for professional therapy or counseling. If you or a loved one is in need of help, please seek professional treatment as soon as possible with a local state-licensed treatment center or professional clinician in your area. Get behind-the-scenes information and sneak peeks into future guests by following us on Instagram, and make sure to connect with the cause by taking part in after-episode discussions on our Facebook group at WASG Podcast.
Well, first of all, I want to commend you for this podcast. I wish we would have had these back then. But what I would love to say is that if you have a loved one out there that's struggling for mental, don't close the doors on them. Don't kick them out on the street. They're already feeling bad enough. They feel nobody loves them. They feel their life is worthless. I think we need to, as a husband or a mom or whatever, we need to love on them. Let them know their worth. Let them know their children, if they have a children or a wife or a husband. Let them know that there's someone that's hurting for them, that loves them. And it's not their fault that they got into that. It was a trap. But so many families are running into that trap and they don't know. Maybe they just want to lose weight. Maybe they just want to stay awake while they drive their truck. Maybe they just think that this can help them study more. Encourage them that they are worth something, that you do love them. So it could be the last time you ever speak to your loved one.
For maybe an addicted parent, I would want to say your family knows what's going on. You're not hiding nothing from nobody. You're not fooling nobody but yourself. There's a lot of help out there. Your family wants to help you. There's a lot of free help out there. They don't cost for most people. There's so many resources out there. For a kid, I would say it's fun for a little while. Eventually, the party's over. It's not worth it. There's a lot more opportunities out there. You got a whole life ahead of you. There's a lot of help for you out there. You have people to talk to at your schools. You might think you don't, but there's always an ear out there for you.
Well, now you tell me I should watch how I act. I should watch how I talk to you, or you're not gonna take me.
When Addicts Say Goodbye podcast is not meant to be used as a substitute or replacement for professional therapy or counseling. If you or a loved one is in need of help, please seek professional treatment as soon as possible with a local state-licensed treatment center or professional clinician in your area. Get behind-the-scenes information and sneak peeks into future guests by following us on Instagram, and make sure to connect with the cause by taking part in after-episode discussions on our Facebook group at WASG Podcast. To our new recovery family, friends, supporters, and ambassadors of sobriety, thanks for being part of the solution and listening. For more information, visit us at whenaddictssaygoodbye.com. There, you'll also find helpful resources, show notes, and more. As part of the recovery family, you can help us share these amazing stories by either connecting with our partners or consider sponsoring an episode. Find more information on our website, make sure to subscribe, and while you're at it, go over to the iTunes store and give us a rating. Believe it or not, those 5-star ratings help out tremendously.
Flowers, beautiful flowers.
When Addicts Say Goodbye podcast is an ADCS Institute production. Editing, mixing, mastering, and sound design by Resonate Recordings.